Okay, I just finished the field trip to the water treatment plant. And then when we flush the toilets, we take a bath, a shower, we wash off our patio or whatever, and the water ends up in the sewer, then it ends up in the sewage treatment plant. And that's what our next field trip is to. And there it is. Now, this is the clubhouse of the golf course. And over here, this is the golf course. And if you went a little further down over as you're looking out to the right, there's a little dirt road that you'd come down and you'd run into the sewage treatment plant. Now, this was just for the base, the Spanish portion and the American side of the base, but we did all of the sewage treatment, and water in the sewer lines eventually came down. That was called the input. And let's bring this down just a little bit more here so we can see it. And we're going to take a look at what is called primary treatment of input from the various lines on base that through gravity, in some cases in towns in the States I know, there are pumping stations that pump the sewage to the sewage treatment plants, and many of them are set up on the same plan as this one. But this was only for the base population, so it wasn't too big. So one of the first things that come in, and what we're looking at, is getting anything that's large. Uh, we kind of strain it, and kind of a very basic primitive system. There were some bars here, and then large things that would get clogged up on here were physically removed. And that's what this is. And they're put into garbage cans, and that was sent to trash. And then another thing, and it wasn't working at this time, is a sort of a blender device that it would just grind up anything. But people who were flushing cigarette butts with their filters that floated, diapers, and this type of thing, they could shred it a little bit, but mostly it was just filtered out. So this was the input. And then it went into this primary settling tank. And as you can probably imagine, it didn't smell very well here. We had a captain from Environmental Service who was taking us on this tour and taking us through the process. So here's one of the garbage cans that anything that floats is driven back by this stream of water, and they're just letting everything else settle. So you get kind of a brownish colored water here that would then go from the settlement in here, and then they scoop it up with little devices and then put it in the garbage cans, and then that goes to trash. And again, what are they doing here? Well, they're seeing, as you can see, it gets pretty nasty here. They'll skim all of this off. This is the stuff that will float. There are a lot of cigarette butts in here that people say, well, I'll just flush them down the toilet. Well, they end up somewhere. And then this is skimmed off. But again, this anything that will settle now, they allow to settle. And supposedly it's been grinded a little bit and made into smaller particles. It did have quite an odor. Now, this part of settling is called anaerobic. That is, there wasn't much oxygen here, and the material was just settling down to the bottom of the tank. And they tried to skim off all this kind of stuff. And here we're just observing this. Now, toward the end of this tank, you get to this area where anything that could sink hopefully sank, and things that could be skimmed off were skimmed off. So we just have now a kind of brownish water. Okay? So very fine particulate material dissolved in the water. So this then uh, will leave, and I'll show you those pipes as to where it goes to. But the sediment in these tanks, again, there's no oxygen there, so these things are breaking down anaerobically. There's no oxygen, and it forms sort of a thick paste, kind of a mud in a sense, that will be drained off from these tanks periodically through this pipe. And these were sludge draining pipes, and they go off to the sludge beds. Now, by this time, bacteria's worked on it, but it's still a material. But remember, we're dealing a lot of waste here, human waste, and urea and things. So this is rather fertile material. And this is referred to as the sludge drying fields out here. And after that sludge dries, it's actually harvested, it's picked up, it could be bagged, and it could be heated in some cases and sold. But we used it for fertilizing various lawns and things at the golf course, and then wherever there needed some fertilizer, this is what was used. So sludge, dried sludge, is a form of fertilizer that comes from the settling tanks in primary treatment, and you saw what it was. Now we see a little bit of where the water that's coming out is going to. And this is called secondary treatment now. Now you have that brownish water that's going to go through these trickling tanks. It comes in, and then this arm moves around and then spraying the water on these rocks. And on these rocks, over time, bacteria have accumulated, and this brown water, rich in dissolved organic content, is now food in a sense for this bacteria, and that breaks down this organic material. And this is a process, since there's aeration, that is lots of air, oxygen in particular, we call this aerobic oxidation, as these bacteria break down this organic material. And for your basic chemistry, you may note that it's carbohydrates, and these organic compounds are broken down basically into carbon dioxide and water. Okay? That's what's happening here. And through decay, but because of the nature of this trickling tank, it's not too deep, you get lots of oxygen, and the water is splashed over these rocks, and there's spaces in these rocks, bacteria on these rocks, so the aerobic digestion, in a sense, with oxygen of that organic material goes on there. And then this tank wasn't working here when we saw it, but they go to this one was, and it goes here, and again, allows things to settle out. And again, notice the color of this water now. I'm going to show you a slide that I put together to show the combination. That here it's pretty clear. This is what went into the system, and this is what's coming out of the system. So we call this gray water. And where does it go? Well, actually there was a holding pond, that had a pump in it that water from that pond would go in through pipes that was used to water the golf course. This is called gray water. But if there was an overflow, not needed, it would just go into this river that ran behind. Now, right now it looks pretty muddy, and it was the dry season. It was the summer, and it wasn't raining, so there wasn't much flow here. But in the wintertime, we do get quite a bit of flow. So uh, the message that the base wanted to send is the water from its sewage treatment plant that they put into this river was cleaner than the water normally found in the river. Okay? And again, we would use that water for irrigation and watering the golf course. And there was a pipe there that they said not potable water, not for drinking. And it came from our sewage plant. And there's just another shot. Now, we had our study area that we used for our summer ecology uh, workshop up a little bit from upstream from this, where we did do some, testing of water and monitoring temperature and the chemical analysis, oxygen content, and things like that. And another thing I meant to show, and we see it here in this last slide, that there's the water trickling tank. That was the secondary treatment. Primary treatment is just to get large particles out. And sometimes that's what's sent into the river. But we did the secondary treatment where we had the organic material in the water exposed to the air, the oxygen, and the spaces of the rocks and the bacteria on the rocks that allowed it to break down, hopefully into the carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide and water, yes. And then here, what you see is a garden. So often associated with a sewage treatment plant, the workers would have gardens. There are beautiful tomatoes here, and they got all this fertilizer from the sludge. Again, hopefully there's no toxic metals in there. They would test that to be careful. And then sometimes they mentioned they would chlorinate this gray water that would come out if it had too high of a bacterial content on the other side. So that'll wrap this up. And let me raise this up a little bit now. So in summary, the sewage treatment plant takes what is coming from the base as wastewater from sinks, bathrooms, showers, and treats it to remove solid material and break down organic matter to return water to close to its natural state. It is done in 2 stages here, primary and secondary treatment. What comes out is often considered gray water in that it is not potable, not drinkable, but may be used for watering the golf course. Now, if you take this water and put it to the water treatment plant, theoretically you could make it so that it's drinkable water. I could recall when we taught our ecology class, there was a sign in Chicago. It says, please flush the toilet after use. They need this for drinking water downstream from us. And that's often what they would say is, the water that's in the river, upstream, they take it out, use it, put it back in the stream, goes down, take it out again. How many digestive systems has that water been through? Well, something to think about in an age where water is something really precious and we want to know what happens to it. Now, in some cases, there is a 3rd stage where if there are toxic chemicals that aren't filtered out, they might have a carbon filter that they pass that through. We didn't cover it. We didn't use that on base. Okay, this one's a little long.